The source of the River Thames has dried up further downstream than ever before, as England looks set to enter a drought that some experts say the country is unprepared for. Britain's Met Office said this July was the driest for England since 1935, with average rainfall at 23.1 millimetres, just 35% of the average for the month. Some parts of the country saw the driest July ever. The River Thames stretches 215 miles across southern England from Gloucestershire in the west through the heart of London, before entering the sea at Essex to the east. The natural spring that supplies the river, known as the source, dries up most summers. But this year the dry riverbed reaches significantly further downstream than in previous years, according to observations by conservation experts. Alistair Nowell, an engagement officer at the Rivers Trust, said while standing in a small section of the Thames in Crickland, about 80 kilometres west of London.
The Thames would normally be its source, and there's a nice pub next to it, would be about 15 kilometres back upstream toward a little place called Coates, and we are actually stood where there is a bit of water in the Thames near Cricklade. So as the crow flies, not entirely sure, probably 10 kilometres or something like that, but to wind down this bit of the Thames, about 15 kilometres of a river behind me to get up where the Thames normally would rise. Now, it's also true to say that the Thames at its source, at the usual source, dries up fairly often. That is true. But to have pushed so far down its course is this early is unusual, and it is worrying. This is the climate change, this is the climate crisis in action, that I am stood in about that deep of the Thames, 15 kilometres into it. I should be a lot wetter than I am right now.
Nowell said the shallow, warmer water contained less oxygen, which fish and other wildlife need to thrive.
The fish that we have that are natural to the UK, that are coming down the Thames here, up in Gloucestershire and Wiltshire, running down through into London, the water that they're finding is much shallower than it should be. It's pooling in these little warm pools. It's much, much easier to boil a small pot of water than a big pot of water. So just think about the effect on that wildlife, like the fish and the invertebrates that live in the water, pulling oxygen out of the water to live. There's less oxygen in that warmer water. That has a massive effect on our wildlife.
The Thames heading lies upstream, a few steps from a stone that marks the source of the river in Gloucestershire. It manages 31-year-old David McMeeking said he was concerned about the effect of climate change on the pub's namesake.
It does seem very different, yeah, it's drier, a lot drier than it's been before, and it's moved, the source has obviously moved a few miles further than it normally would. It's always dry in the summer here, but we do worry about what that's going to look like in the winter now, because if it's that dry up in the summer, it might not even come back this way in the winter. So that's sort of a fear, but it is still the official source of the Thames, so the stone will always be there, but whether or not the water comes through is another issue. I mean, this is global warming happening to us right now. This is climate change. The change has happened. The river should be there, and it's over there now, quite a while over there, so that's obviously something we're going to be worried about.
Unprecedented heat and a lack of rainfall has pushed two water companies in the country's south to announce temporary bans on the use of housepipes and sprinkler systems. Thames Water, which supplies 15 million customers across London and southeast England, said it was planning to introduce the similar curbs. A 4-day extreme heat warning came into force in parts of England and Wales on Thursday. The Met Office issued its first such warning ever last month, when temperature breached 40 centigrade or 104 Fahrenheit for the first time. Climate expert and hydrologist at the University of Reading, Hannah Collock, said low rainfall has left river levels and aquifers low, while water has been taken out of the waterways to irrigate crops, top up drinking water, and for use in industry.
So you can see here that the water level is very, very low. And we would expect the water to be much higher at summer. I mean, in winter it goes right up to the top of the bridge pier, but in summer this is quite a low level. So we've had a long period with no rain, and that means that rain is not feeding the river systems, and also the water tables are very, very low as well. So the water can't spring out of the ground to feed the river upstream. We've been taking a lot of water out of the rivers as well to irrigate our crops in terms of keeping the crops growing and making sure they've got enough water, but also for drinking water and industry as well. We've been using more water because we've been experiencing heat waves. We're just about to step into our second heat wave of the summer. And so we're at a critical position really. If we don't get rain in August, in fact if we have a dry winter, then we could be in severe trouble come spring and next summer when we really don't have any water stores left whatsoever. So as we go into the future, we're expecting to see more droughts and more floods. So we're going to see changes in the way that we're going to have water in the UK to use or to store. And it's really important that we learn from this drought. We can see that we're not ready for droughts. We can see we're going into water restrictions already. We haven't got the infrastructure in place to deal with these problems. We've got leaks springing out everywhere. We don't have enough water for agriculture. So therefore we need to do something quite quickly in order to make sure that infrastructure becomes up to scratch, because we're not ready now, let alone for what's going to happen in the future with climate change.
She said housepipe restrictions on individuals were useful to help change attitude to water usage. But investment in infrastructure and policy on preventing further climate change were even more important.